All right, today's session we'll learn about the native grass landscape at Denver Water's admin building, along with its innovative on-site wastewater treatment system. Austin will provide an in-depth look at the project's background and key details, while Katie will share insights into landscape management practices and the valuable lessons learned throughout the process. Austin is a water efficiency lead at Denver Water. Austin is a dedicated professional approaching 20 years of experience in land use, water conservation, and sustainable agriculture. Austin has been involved with his family's dryland wheat farm in Keensburg, Colorado, his entire life. He is passionate about implementing sustainable practices and collaborating with local partners to optimize water usage in both farming and municipal settings. At Denver Water, Austin is a water efficiency lead and is passionate about developing programs and policies to enhance water conservation and efficiency. He is committed to building partnerships and programs that collaborate with state and municipal agencies to promote efficient water use. Austin is committed to creating a future where urban and rural communities thrive together, ensuring sustainable use of our natural resources for generations to come. And Katie is the Sustainability Program Analyst at Denver Water. She was born and raised in Denver and went to University of Northern Colorado, where she earned her BS in Environmental Earth Sciences and a minor in Sustainability Studies. While at UNC, she also participated in a student sustainability group, Student Leaf, and used student fees to fund sustainable projects on campus. At Denver Water, Katie works with the organization to make improvements on internal operations, including waste reduction, internal water savings, low water landscape transformations, and overall reduction of greenhouse gas emissions. Katie also focuses on outreach and education of employees on sustainable topics. And I will go ahead and pass it over to my awesome coworkers. Enjoy the presentation.
Thanks for kicking that off, B. Yep, so today's topic, we're going to take a little bit of a different look at our redevelopment and how we switch from a traditional kind of Kentucky bluegrass landscape to primarily native grasses and a lot of other native plants on site. And this really started at the kind of conceptual design phase of us redeveloping our entire campus, where we only left 3 buildings on site and completely changed all of the other buildings and how we operate within our campus, our 35-acre campus, over the course of many years, spanning from about 2018 all the way through establishment of the landscape in 2022. So as we redeveloped this, we knew that we wanted to be kind of a showcase for many things and a leader. And at the time, that really meant pushing the boundaries of both kind of energy efficiency and water efficiency. So going into our design charrette and working with our consultant team, our main goals were to be LEED Platinum, net zero energy, and incorporate one water design as much as possible. And I think we accomplished this pretty well. And we now operate the building on the bleeding edge of water management. And to do this, we had to overcome many regulatory barriers, especially around rainwater capture, expanding the uses of reclaimed water and recycled water. And we also have an on-site wastewater treatment system. So this actually kind of changed who we are as Denver Water. We are mostly just a water supplier, whether that be raw water, potable drinking water, or reclaimed recycled water, into that wastewater realm. So we have an on-site wastewater treatment plant. We have an entire team that monitors that, and it works just like a large wastewater treatment plant, only it's scaled down more to a building level. So this kind of highlights on the water side how we were looking at our campus, and this follows really well with a lot of other resources that have been developed since we went through this process, like Urban Land Institute's Water Smart from the Start documented or report. And it really focuses on starting with water conservation and water budgets up front. And that helps you figure out how much water use is really needed for both indoor and outdoor uses. And it influences your designs. And in our case, it really drove us towards moving away from Kentucky bluegrass as our primary landscape feature to a much more diverse landscape that features native grasses. The next step is really separating out what you need potable water for and what you can meet with non-potable demands, whether that's reclaimed water, recycled water, or redirecting stormwater or capturing rainwater and using it after major rain events. So obviously, we wanted to keep high quality potable drinking water where we need it, drinking fountains, kitchens, showers, things like that. But we realized that toilet flushing doesn't need to be done with potable drinking water. That can be done with reclaimed water as long as it's done in a way that is safe and doesn't create aerosols and things like that that influence public health. Also, our landscape really doesn't need high quality potable water. It can get by with raw water or reclaimed water just fine. That does influence some of the seed mixes and things that we um, implement depending on the salinity levels of the reclaimed water. Ours, being at the headwaters, is incredibly clean to start with, and even on the reclaim side, it stays pretty low in salinity. And then after we do that, we have to develop our non-potable sources. On here we have gray water listed, but we never actually implemented that because we went to a black water treatment system, so a full wastewater treatment system on site. And that really just kind of helps us maximize how much we can reuse on site. And then rainwater capture is fairly tricky under Colorado water law. So we had to document how much rainwater we would be capturing, and we had to measure and monitor that on the way into the cisterns when we capture it, and then file for a water right at the state water court and augment the South Platte River with the amount that we capture. We designed our system so that we can kind of expand or contract that, but we filed for a water right that is larger than what we typically capture, just so we have that ability. If we decide that that's the course we want to go in the future, we can expand the number of cisterns and rainfall capture that way. And then the last part is integrating stormwater best practices. And these are really pretty small things that we can do. So instead of taking precipitation and trying to move it off our site as quickly as possible through traditional gray infrastructure, it's really an exercise in grading and how do you use the collection areas, whether those are asphalt laydown yards or parking garages and things like that, to redirect the water to the landscape and really slow it down and sink it into the soils as much as possible. And then some of that is constrained by, again, Colorado water law, only be able to retain the stormwater on site for up to 72 hours. So how do we move that into the landscape as quickly as possible over the 72 hours that we're able to hold it before it re-releases back into the South Platte River? So those were our guiding principles or our design philosophy going in. And this kind of highlights an early conceptual plan of our campus. Here were all of the ideas that really came out through design charrettes and iterative design process with our consultants. We wanted rainwater harvesting. We knew we had to showcase low water, low flow plumbing fixtures. At this point, we also wanted to have a demonstration garden. So Denver Water, for a long time, had a xeriscape demonstration garden, and this was in our original plans, and I'll get to how that changed over time. The next one's really exciting, and it's a pretty small change, recycled process water. And this points to our meter shop, where we used to have a 10,000 gallon tank, and we'd fill that up to test all our meters, rebuild our meters, and make sure they're operating properly. This was single use. We'd fill it up, we'd send it through the meters, and then it would go into the sanitary sewer. So we knew from the beginning that this was a major place that we could become more efficient. So now we recirculate that water back into the tank, very little water losses, and we monitor it for water quality and basically top off this giant tank as we test our meters. Throughout the campus, we also integrated porous pavers, and there are several different kind of landscape things that will pop up on this list. But most of the campus is short grass, native prairie, and then we also have native detention areas with slightly different seed mixes that I'll get into. Over on the administration building, moving to the bottom, we have Eco Machine, which is our on-site wastewater treatment system. Water efficient cafe, so that is all the warewashing equipment. And this one is really interesting because we also had to kind of, from an operations standpoint, know that when you're operating your own wastewater treatment facility, you need to be pretty careful about what goes down the drain so you're not impacting all the little microbes and bugs that break down the wastewater and bring it back to clean drinking water. Typically at large scale wastewater treatment facilities, this is just done through dilution of so many sources. When it's a single site, you have to be kind of very careful of source control of what is going into your system. And then lastly, one of the other ones kind of mentioned this earlier, bioswales throughout the campus, really redirecting that rain to slow it down on site and get it into the soil profile. And our truck wash on site is done with recycled water, meaning of a closed loop system. And we are just topping it off as things evaporate or spray out of the truck bays there. So what do we do with all this information? We're still conceptual side, design charrette. We need to figure out how to model all this. We have a lot more water sources coming on. We have our Rufus system reuse for us or our on-site wastewater treatment facility. We designed this as if people would be working in office 5 days a week. Katie Fletcher will get into how COVID and all of the changed work schedules have affected some of this over time. And we had to break out how much would be indoor fixtures, so kind of continuous loop within the building, and how much would be overflow and would go into our cistern. So that's the gallons to irrigation. And then rainwater capture, square footage of how much we're collecting. That's just our administration building and our parking garage, and how efficient that system is at collecting water and moving it to the cistern. Stormwater, we considered, can we also file for a water right that allows us to use that water within our detention ponds? And we ultimately decided that that was infrequent enough and pretty costly to pump it out and figure out a way to treat that as well, that we did all of our stormwater management through trying to slow it down on site. And then lastly, our cistern specs. How big are we going to make this? And this was a lot of back and forth between how much cisterns cost, how much it impacts our total construction budget. But what we finally decided was we only had room for about 75,000 gallons of cistern capacity, and that changed the landscape side of how much water we could supply to our campus through establishment period. And then we have down here a traditional kind of water budget of different landscape vegetation types on site, and then also how we are managing those. So you'll see quality, good, moderate, good, and exceptional. So we can play around with all of that, and we can basically do many model runs that say, well, under drought conditions, we would expect this. If we see a future climate that is much hotter and drier than what we're seeing today, we'll have to change some of our management practices. By going to native grasses that are adapted for these sites, we're already kind of hedging our bets and making our system much more resilient. And that drove some of the future usage of knowing that if we stay in Kentucky bluegrass, we're going to have to be adding more and more water. If we are moving to native grasses that are adapted for this climate already, we can add a little bit of supplemental water in those really dry, hot years. And most of the time, we can probably not irrigate after establishment. And these landscapes will grow and contract based on kind of the climate that is happening or the weather that is happening in that given year. So this is just an example of kind of what those look like. Our blue line is our total cistern level over time. And throughout the winter, we are able to fill those up with precipitation and no irrigation. But starting in April, we have a whole bunch of little irrigation events roughly every 3 days. And that just shows how much water is going out of the cistern. And then anytime that you see the red, that is where our water demand exceeds the cistern level. So we don't have enough water in the system. And we have to supplement our system or top off our system's cistern with potable water. So after we went through a lot of these exercises and the campus redevelopment proceeded, we got into a more realistic kind of design. So in this, you can see a couple different highlighted areas of the landscape. Our dark green are detention pond areas. Those are going to be a different soil mix or different seed mix. Our light green areas are our highest visual impact on our site. So these are the ones that we want to maintain in a little bit better condition. And the seed mix that went to that is a slightly higher, taller set of native grasses that I'll jump into in just a minute. And then our orange area, these are mostly just drive-by areas. We don't have a lot of pedestrian interaction. These are lower growing native grasses, and they look great when you're biking by, driving by, but they're not at quite the same density as what we have on the interior of our campus. So our first seed mix that we chose, you can see right along the roadside, and this has actually been mowed down and is kind of a beauty band right next to the road to help keep it look neat and tidy. And that was buffalo bluegrass, blue grama, and inland saltgrass. And I thought the choice of inland saltgrass was really interesting here because that's typically a pretty deep-rooted native grass getting down into kind of a water table that is moving up and down. We put it right on the roadside because it actually does a pretty good job with salinity. And we were thinking like maybe some of the road salts would impact the health of the plants along the side here. And then everything that you see to the right of that is actually the seed mix that I'll get into right now. But this was, again, primarily buffalo grass, blue grama, added in side oats grama, western wheatgrass, and sand dropseed. And you can see this is a different part of campus. Our bee box is in the background there. And we're letting this grow a little bit taller, and it is really responding more to the weather conditions, growing, contracting based on the precipitation that it's getting. So a little bit more hands-off, a little bit taller. It provides a lot of different beauty throughout the year. This is obviously kind of early in the season, just as it's putting out seed heads, but really gets into those nice browns and kind of purples in the fall and seeing different sort of growth throughout the year. And then our next one, seed mix 3, this is really what we focused on our detention areas, and it's a little bit different that we have a lot of different species that do pretty well in both more saturated soils, but also really dry soils. And we seeded this thing kind of uniformly all the way across with this mix, and then really let the ecology take over and let the individual plant species respond to what they were experiencing. So each of our detention areas looks a little bit different depending on how much water it gets. Some of them act more like a traditional spring or seep. And we actually have some cattails that have moved in, and either the seeds have blown in or they're coming in from runoff into this. And also the Nebraska sedges do really well in this area. And then you'll notice we don't have a seed type or type 4 mix. We jump right over to 5, and I'm not sure why it's that way, but I couldn't find a 4th mix anywhere. So I think that was something that was dropped, or that's a different schedule in our landscape plan that was more of the perennial species that we have around buildings that are a little bit more showy. So our last one is very similar to the second one, and the major difference here is it also had wildflowers mixed in with this. And this is really great just because this is approaching our main campus. It's right next to our old Three Stones building, which was our first water treatment facility back in the early 1900s. And the wildflowers provide a little bit of a showier piece and invite people into the landscape a little bit more to come check them out, see what's growing. And I think it's also really interesting that we've let the ecology take over. We have several rabbit brushes and other perennial species that are coming back. So that's either contamination in the seed mix, or that's everything that was already in the soil profile and the seed bank there, expressing itself in the conditions that it finds right. And I think that's a really interesting point for native landscapes. We didn't necessarily plan for that, but they are expressing themselves and thriving in the same conditions of the seed mixes that we have. And we are kind of letting ecology take course, and Katie will jump into that right now.
Thanks, Austin. So, like Austin said, we had a few challenges, and one of the first challenges that we had was the timing of our occupancy and COVID-19. So we were able to move into the operations or the main admin building in November 2019. And then all of us were sent home March of 2020 to work from home. So only essential personnel were on site, and they were not as focused on the landscape. And we were still finishing the landscape from the contractors kind of into 2020. And we just really defaulted into our usual sort of mow and blow expectations. So with no one on site to really manage this, it kind of struggled to establish. We also had some miscommunication from our leadership down to supervisors. So our upper management really wanted it to, hey, don't mow. We want it to look long. We want it to, grow tall based on design. But then supervisors wanted it to look clean, because at our other facilities, if things are not, mowed, looking nice, we get citations, we get complaints from neighbors. So there really was just kind of that lack of communication there, and ultimately that helps the maintenance team. Well, not helps the maintenance team, but the maintenance team really felt in the dark because of that. So they weren't sure what they were going to be following in terms of mowing, establishing, and what we needed to do. Another one of the challenges that we had initially was using contractors versus in-house maintenance. This does go back to the miscommunication, but again, telling contractors to do one thing on a different site is different than what we have at other facilities going on. And sometimes they would come in and just mow everything down extremely short, as if it was Kentucky bluegrass. And in 2022, we did create a new facilities maintenance team as a part of the sustainability team. And that helped us create more hands-on management and monitoring of the site. And we are able to rely less on our contractors now and do a lot of stuff more in-house on the complex. We also had a gap with our native grass knowledge. So again, this was a new type of landscape for our teams to manage. Most of the types of landscapes that we have at our other facilities were Kentucky bluegrass, or other types of landscapes that just did not require as much knowledge that we didn't have. So we did attend some trainings about native grasses, especially one from CSU, which was great. And we did learn a lot about native grasses and best practices to use. We also had to change our establishment expectations, especially our facilities team. They wanted things to look nice right away. They felt that this is a reflection of their work personally. So they really, really wanted things to look nice in one season, but it's just not realistic to have that compared to like sod that you can just throw down water and it looks really good. And then finally, we've had some struggles with our own employees, keeping them off of the grass. We realized that there were some social trails forming. So we did have to add a few permanent paths where social trails were happening. But in other areas, we have had to put a lot of signs up that say, please stay off the grass. We're trying to establish this. And it's gotten a lot better, but that's been one of the struggles that we've had. I wanted to share a few before and after photos, and keep in mind these were taken with two different phones. So they might not look crazy before and after, but pinky promise, there's a lot of difference between 2022 and 2025. But you can see a lot more bare soil in 2022. And here we have a lot more grass filling in. You can look down the campus and again, just see a lot more greenery. These were taken at about the same time of year, but 3 years apart. So we have had a lot more luck establishing. One thing I'll point out here is that we actually had one little patch of grass in this area that is now graveled over because this was just an irrigation struggle with the point of the triangle. So we have had to reconfigure a few things after we really were occupied on campus. But overall, things have filled out a lot better. The trees, as you can see, have gotten a lot bigger. And again, this is one of the detention basins that Austin mentioned. And you can see that there's a lot more bare ground here and things have grown in a lot better. This picture was actually taken yesterday, so there still is a little bit of wet soils from all of the rain that we had. But this is a great area for birds. We have a lot of wildlife on campus, like foxes, rabbits, and a lot of them do spend time down here in this detention area. So some of the things that we did to change things and encourage some better establishment, the facilities maintenance team, first and foremost, did some reseeding. After years of that extremely short mowing and frequent mowing, the grass really did need some extra help. So they did use those seed mixes and did some more overseeding. And this year, specifically spring 2025, the coverage was good enough overall that the team focused more on areas that just needed a little bit of extra attention. So you can see in this bottom left photo, like right in the corner of our sidewalk, we did put in a little more seeding and supported that with some compost. They also were focused on some soil improvement. So even just in the north and south end of our 35-acre campus, there's a big difference in what the soils are like. So closer on the north end of campus, we do deal with some rocky soils. So again, they have spent a lot of time raking out these bigger rocks and gravel and trying to add some soil amendment just to help the seeds establish a little bit more in the bare areas. In terms of irrigation, these are all now on the smart sensors for irrigation. So since we've gotten so much rain lately, we have not been able to, or we have been able to rely less on irrigation, which is great. And this is just a closer up photo to show that it's still a work in progress. We do still have some of the rocky soils and some bare patches that even with a little extra help, again, when we had those really heavy rains, washed some of the compost and the seeds out. But this is on a slope down into the detention basin. So this is filling out a lot better, but it still needs a little bit of help in some areas. The other things that we did to encourage better establishment, one of the biggest things was mowing a lot less. So like I mentioned, we had a contractor coming in and they were kind of on the typical mow and blow type schedule. But once we got everyone on the same page and the team was given better direction on mowing, we've really cut back significantly. We do, like Austin said, do some of the beauty bands around roads and some of our sidewalks on the exterior of campus. The interior, we still let things grow long. This year, for example, in spring, we did not do a mowing in the spring just to allow the grasses to go to seed, but we do usually have a mowing before the first snow so that the grasses that are tall just don't get knocked down anyway. We also, for snow management, this year switched to a brine application instead of just traditional rock salt. The brine comes out of a machine that we have, and it allows for extremely precise application of the brine. So we estimated that we used about 60% less salt, and that is improving the soil and the grasses right directly near sidewalks where we would typically get a lot of extra salt. For weed management, the team does do a lot of hand pulling, and occasionally they will do a spot treatment of weeds as needed, depending on the species. But Jason Hopkins, who's our facilities manager, noted that this year specifically, there are a lot less weeds that they have to manage because now the grasses that we have wanted to encourage have been able to really establish and outcompete the weeds. And just basically kind of summing up some of the lessons that we've learned, patience is key. This isn't going to happen in one season. It's going to take time for it to establish, especially if there was a big disturbance with weeds. We did have some struggles with weeds initially after construction. It's really important to help the good grass win, which will also help you keep the weeds at bay. Soils can definitely vary a lot, even on the same property, and that's going to impact the success that you have. Our south end of campus was also completed earlier in construction, so it's had a little bit more time to establish. So you really can see the difference between timing and soil quality and how that can impact your projects. Keep people off the grass. And if you can, catch social trails early. Again, we usually have to put out some signage once the grass starts to come up that says, hey, please don't make shortcuts through the grass to get to the parking garage, to get to buildings, because it definitely is susceptible. The saying, plants grow by the inch and die by the foot, pretty true here. And again, communication is key. Having buy-in from the top down is really important, just so that we're communicating expectations. Oh, and see a LEED Platinum building. My lights turned off. Very energy efficient. So yeah, communication's key, making sure that everyone is on the same page, from leadership down to contractors doing the work, because that miscommunication can lead to some issues with your establishment. And that is what I have for our lessons learned.
Thanks, Katie. Thank you, Austin. Well, we can open it up to some discussion or questions now if anyone has anything. And I can kind of kick us off. Katie, can you talk a bit about reactions from employees that might not have really understood the different type of landscape we were trying to achieve at the admin building?
Yeah, I think at first, especially when we all were brought back into the hybrid schedule, which is 2 days a week required, but a lot of people are more 3. There was some feedback that like, oh, why are we just letting it look like this? Why are we just letting weeds grow? And so we did have to put out some communications about the design and that this is low water, this is native plants. Like we just had to kind of prepare people for that. But I think now everyone actually is very appreciative of it. Our facilities team gets a lot of compliments on how beautiful the space looks, especially this time of year when the wildflowers start to pop up. Everyone is very excited by the landscape.
Yeah. I have an interesting perspective. I didn't work for Denver Water in 2019, but I started in 2022. And just seeing it from 2022 to 2025, there have been like so many great improvements to the landscape. It looks so much better. So you guys have done a great job managing it. We do have a question in the chat. Austin, can you speak to the Regreen product that's in our seed mix?
Yeah, Regreen is a sterile wheatgrass, and it is designed more for erosion control. So that is something that will come up pretty quickly. It will kind of be a precursor. For my background in agriculture, it is kind of like a cover crop. It is greening up really quick, it's stabilizing the soil, and then it dies back after about a year. But it also does a good job of keeping that soil moisture kind of in that top level while your other seeds start to establish. So it's designed as a product that is only going to live for about a year and will not really go to seed. And it's more a soil moisture erosion control management portion of the seed mix.
Awesome. Thanks, Austin. Do we have any other questions or comments from anyone?
I will add a question. So since the campus was done in phases, do you know how it was seeded over time? Was it primarily a drill seeder? Was it terra seeded, kind of blown in on top? I think I remember the answer to this, but we were gone for a large portion of it and didn't actually get to see the initial installation of this.
Yeah, the initial installation, from what I remember, you'll have to forgive me, I can't think of the term, was with the green kind of blown in, like, did I think that neon green that they
Yeah, like
have kind of cover?
either
Hydro
hydromulch
mulch?
or yeah.
Yes,
Yep.
yes,
Okay,
hydro mulch.
great.
Yeah, hydro seeding. Thank you. I know that was done in a lot of different places initially. And I think the facilities team has done kind of a mix of overseeding, and then they did do a lot of aeration as well in the spring, just to kind of help break up some of the more difficult soils, and then did the overseeding after aeration.
We've got a really good question from Lance in the chat. He asks, when you are overseeding or adding additional seed, are you intentional with the grass species that you seed with? For example, if you have a lot of bare spots in gravel soils, are you adding a species that prefers that soil, or are you noticing species that are performing better than others and add more of that grass species?
I could verify this with the facilities team, but from our conversations, they stick to kind of like Austin described in this other slides. I guess I could go back, is they do try to stick to the seed mixes in the designated areas that need them. So if we are closer up to the administration building, they do focus on using more of the type 5 mix. And then in the areas south of the complex, if we're in kind of the detention areas, they'll use the type 3, type 2, etc.
Okay, so not adjusting the percentage of the species in the mix based on how you see it performing. We're just kind of sticking with the standard mix when we overseed.
Yeah.
Have either of you noticed anything like thriving particularly well, like kind of bullying out the other species in the mix?
I would say over time, I have noticed on kind of the interior of the campus, areas that we had wildflowers early on, and maybe this is the grasses greening up before the wildflowers. I've seen fewer wildflowers over time, and initially those were coming up in the places where our mower crews couldn't get. So rocky hill slopes in the detention ponds were thriving early on because they had more time to grow and they weren't getting knocked back every couple weeks. But over time, we've seen fewer and fewer wildflowers there, and I suspect that is the grasses out competing them. And if we want more wildflowers, we're going to need to reintroduce some sort of disturbance in areas to allow those to have an opportunity to kind of use that annual growth pattern to reestablish. And then I would also say some of the social paths and areas that we've had to do work around the cisterns to put in new monitoring equipment. The buffalo grass and blue grama have jumped back really well. I know we've amended some of those areas with a little bit of compost, but if you're up on the 5th or 6th floor looking down, you can see these really bright green patches. And I think that is the extra nitrogen in there really helping buffalo grass, blue grama accelerate and reestablish more quickly. So those are a couple places that I've noticed a little bit.
Okay, thanks, Austin. We have a question about someone who's experiencing a lot of cheatgrass in their native stand. They were wondering if we have had any problems with cheatgrass and how we deal with it. Lance added some advice here saying that fall is the best time to control cheatgrass.
I think from what I've seen, we have had a little bit of cheatgrass on some edges. We also, along the train track corridor, get a lot of kochia that grows very tall. And it's almost, we need to manage our neighbor's property to prevent it from coming onto ours. But the other areas that we've seen cheatgrass has been right around some pathways where establishment was a little bit later, and mechanical removal has been the best way. So mowing, exactly as Lance has said, keeping them kind of in the beauty band realm has done a pretty good job of physically removing that. And over time, those areas have decreased, but we still have a little bit here and there.
Yep, thanks, Austin. Okay, we had a question about the effect of stormwater concentration on grass area maintenance. Has the bioswale approach added significantly to labor and intensity of maintenance practices?
No, not really. When they're dry in the fall, we do kind of mow them back a little bit. Um, our campus, we're not getting large kind of street runoff events. Our campus is pretty contained. We have one road that runs through it. But a lot of the water that collects on there goes to normal storm infrastructure and doesn't necessarily come onto our site. So a lot of the water that we are storing is internal to our campus. It's normal green infrastructure stuff of picking up trash, um, kind of making sure our screens are clean. But the smaller detention facilities do a really good job of balancing the water that's coming onto site and kind of responding from the different seed types that we have on there and expressing themselves in different ways. So our wettest one definitely has more of our Nebraska sedge and some cattails that have come in, like I said. Um, but we're not doing a lot of work, and I don't know if we did any sort of soil structure improvement in our green infrastructure areas where we put in different subsoils or anything like that to help drain them naturally and sink it into the soil profile more. Um, I think from what we know from our colleagues over at Green Infrastructure City and County of Denver, they think that it's going to be about every 30 years where they're actually physically digging out some of those soils. And if you have concentrations of certain chemicals on site, they're saying that that's showing up in the plant material. So it's important to, at the kind of end of the season, when you're cutting them back for winter, actually remove that plant material so that you're getting some of those contaminants that way. So that would be my best answer on that, but it's a really good question, and I think I would need to research more before I can give you a full answer.
Yeah, thanks, Austin. With all the rain we've had recently, it's been outside of the part of the office that I sit in. It overlooks that large detention basin, and it was pretty wild to me how long that stayed full with all the, it was like didn't infiltrate super quickly. So that was really cool to see. And then of course it's all really green now.
Yeah,
All
this is
right.
that big one that B is mentioning just for reference.
Oh, we can't. The slide hasn't switched.
Oh,
Oh, which slide are you guys needing?
14.
14. All right. There you
Yeah.
go. Yeah, and you can definitely see those saturated soils and closest to us in the 2025 picture. And I really also like this one. And if you look to the north end of that detention pond or south end of that detention pond, close to all the asphalt, you see how green it is, and that is kind of the grading piece. So we use all of that asphalt as our collection area, and it is just kind of sheet runoff toward the detention pond. So the tops of the hill are very green, and then as you move down, it becomes less green, where there's typically less water, unless we get really large events, and then it's saturated soils.
We had another question, if we had included any bioretention plants purposely in that area beyond the seed mix, I'm assuming.
No, so we kind of stuck to that standard seed mix. And we have definitely noticed that these areas are more diverse. Right under the orange arrow, there's another kind of inlet or outfall that acts almost as a seep. It's got kind of a constant, very slow trickle of water that comes out of it. And even though it is a south-facing hill slope, it is really green, really diverse. And I love that area campus. I wish I had a close-up picture of it. But you're getting some really tall grasses that are just kind of naturally expressing themselves either from the seed mix or what was in the soil seed bank from all these years ago. And it's also really interesting to note that this is highly industrial site where this detention pond is. This is where our um, clarifying ponds were for our first potable drinking water system all the way back in I don't know, 1917. Um, And this area has just changed so much through time. Before we redid this campus, this was also where our plumbing shop and trade shops and one of our IT buildings was. So it's just changed so much. It was under asphalt for many years, then it was dug out, and who knows what's actually in those soils within this detention pond. When we were doing it, you could almost see kind of different layers. From years of different uses over time.
I apologize. I did not get that question right, and this is because of my inexperience with plant material for bioswales. But the question was, did we use any phytoremediation plants? And so these are the plants that uptake metals and pollutants. Are you aware of any intentional placement of those types of plants in the basin?
I am not, and I think this again goes to our starting water that is filtering into this is our campus, and we kind of work through that from a source control standpoint, knowing what is on site and what is in our laydown yard, and it is really a lot of the materials that we're constantly going and putting into like all the infrastructure across our distribution system. So it's storage for pipes, it's storage for fire hydrants and things like that. It's not necessarily taking into account anything else. Or our site isn't taking any of the stormwater that's showing up on the street. That is going to the storm infrastructure. This is really detaining water that is already on our campus, falling through precipitation that way.
Thanks, Austin.
Yep.
Austin, if you want, I can share my screen. I have a picture of that south side of the detention.
Oh, great. Yeah.
I went on a little photo walk yesterday for updated pictures.
Yep.
Ooh, nice.
Yeah, so you can definitely see a couple of the outfall areas. And then on your right side, that rocky area, that's kind of what I'm talking about, that it acts almost as a natural seep. There's an outfall just above that, but it's kind of a constant trickle.
Yeah, you can see this is another angle of it. And this is where we do get, like Austin said, a lot of the wildflowers that do pop up here, since this is not as frequently mowed. And just kind of a wider shot. One of the things that was popping up in some of the areas were volunteer cottonwoods. So we did have to make sure to remove those where we did not want them.
Okay, it looks like we're slowing down on questions. I'm just going to do a last call on questions or comments. Okay, well, we really appreciate everyone hopping on for this educational chat. Thank you, Austin and Katie, for taking the time to walk us through this awesome transformation on the Denver Water campus. Yeah, and I just want to put a call out again. If anyone on this call has a topic or project that they'd like to offer up for one of these educational sessions, please reach out to someone in the Native Grass Working Group, and we'd be happy to host you and learn about your project. All right. Thank you, everyone. Have a good day, and we'll see you at the next one.
And for whoever's still on, I'll do a quick Colorado Waterwise plug. We often do a tour of our campus that is kind of the same presentation in person that breaks out our onsite wastewater treatment facility, and then just kind of in real time, I'll tour the outdoor portion of this and show off the landscape. And it's a great way to experience it in person, but highlights a lot of the same things that we went over today. So typically that happens in May or June of every year. So look out for Colorado Waterwise tours if you ever want to see this campus in person.